Hi, my name's Rigger, this is You Alright, and it turns out that channels actually need some content, so I should probably get on to actually making some. But before all that, the YouTube things I guess, so like and subscribe if you'd like to see more from me. If you have any thoughts on anything, then I'd love to hear about it in the comments. Ring the bell and, I don't know, let's go. In a perfect world, I'd make a full-length, in-depth video about all of these ideas. I'd also have not recorded this entire thing with the wrong mic selected, but you know, live and learn. But I have a little over a week before Halloween, and I at least have one more video I want to get out by then. So, instead of that, I thought I'd jump into this popular current bandwagon trend called tier lists. They were big at the start of the year, so I'm sure they're still relevant, right? And then we can cover all of this in one big go. But in actuality, what I'm going to do is use this format to go over some various theories and talking points for these characters. This structure works as good as any, so, you know, let's do it. So, here's the list. I'll quickly run through the tiers because I structured it this way for a reason. Basically, we're going from bottom to top, and the order in the tier rows people appear is how relevant they are to that category. So for instance, the closest to the rest in peace header up the top is the most likely to die. It kinda doesn't apply for the not attending category, for obvious reasons. So, not attending speaks for itself. They're the characters who for the moment, there is no suggestion that they'll be here. Safe are for people that are absolutely safe and will survive. Unlikely is for those who it is unlikely they will die. But then we get to filler death. Filler death are people that very likely will die, but they're just recognizable faces and filler characters. They get their own little category in the middle, so that the more interesting imminent danger and rest in peace category isn't filled up with nobodies that we don't really care about. Wasteful, but pointless, are those who might die, but to do so would be a misuse of their character, given everything else going on. Imminent danger is when we start getting really juicy and is full of those who really could be on the chopping block this volume. And I'll tell you right now, it is the most full row in this list. And rest in peace is for those who it is time to lose. They're goners. So let's get started. Okay, so straight out the bat, I lied to you. Or at least sort of fibbed. This board doesn't have every character. I realize I didn't include Team Sun, Team Coffee, the staff at Beacon, and it's mostly because I don't really have any talking points on them, so just mentally stick them in not attending anyway. Oh, and I have committed a great sin. I did not include Zwei or Shopkeep either. I know, I hope you find a way to forgive me. If nothing else, they're absolutely safe. But, that out of the way, let's start with not attending. I swear this is not just a waste of time, I have some stuff to say. First is Hazel, and honestly, man, I don't know what they're gonna do with him. I've actually been thinking about doing a video and trying to plan on what they could do in the future to try and recover him. But the main thing is that he was name dropped by Ironwood, so he's still relevant, and the chances he's tagged along for this are minimal. Logically, Salem could have brought him for more firepower, but looking at the situation from a writing perspective, this impending volume is so bulky, with so many characters and such big events coming, that including another top level, villain player in the situation is so unnecessary. To make it easier on themselves, I hope they've left Hazel out of this, and he can just be another boss for later down the line. He can be heading to Vacuo to plan ahead, or something. It's logical enough that with all of this force, Salem might think she doesn't need him, and for all our sakes, I hope the crew left him out to try and make this thing more manageable. So in essence, he shouldn't be here, and I really hope that it stays that way. Alright, the next one is real quick. It's Ty. As much as I'd personally really like to see more Ty in the future, he's here because I need to roll him in with the next character, which is Raven. Personally, I think the Volume 5 post-credits thing is just showing how Raven escaped, but we do have to consider it's possible they've been in contact with everything going on. I really would like to see that, but not this season. They're also here because there's always the rampant talk about the possibility of a Team Stark flashback, which would technically include them in the volume. Again, this is not the time and place for it. I do really think that Volume 8 will be the home of many, many flashbacks. I think given the short time span, the extra episode and the volume length, and the multiple possible deaths, I think there's going to be flashbacks all over this thing. But not Team Stark. Look, I don't clamour for that as much as everyone else, but even if you really are going to give it to us, it's not the time and place. We have so much more to be doing. But I will stick on here that I did have a fun idea of just a sort of what if you wanted a fun little reference, if this was going to be the big end battle. You could do a thing where Yang is in trouble, and then vroom, portal opens, and all the adults run through. Raven, Ty, Oobleck, Pork, Glinda. Why not just all the bandits to fill up space behind Raven? And then, yeah, it's just a rip-off of Endgame. But you've got the circular portals on one side with all the ground troops, and then the flying monstrosity, evil bad guys, like, looming in. And aping popular stuff is what RWBY writing just does sometimes, so all I'm saying is it's fun, and don't pretend it's not somewhat possible. And yes, I know about, like, voice actors and stuff, they don't even have to talk, you're just getting, like, forces through. It's more for the visual anyway. It won't happen, but, you know, whatever. And now onto our last pair in the first category, that's Mercury and Emerald. I put them in the most not attending slots. I guess Emerald the most of that, because she'd probably be the least up for another mass death situation. But, you know, it's just likely they're not coming. It is possible, just like with Hazel, that Salem brought everyone with her, but hopefully not. I do want an Emerald redemption, and I'd even be up for it with Mercury. I don't hate him as much as many seem to, and I think it's quite possible to do one. But like Hazel, I hope they're sent to Vacuo or something. However, it would be mildly up the idea of having them like asked to come along or snuck along, and at the battle, they abandon Salem and defect trying to save Atlas because they realize how crazy this all is and they have some info that could help. But, you know, I doubt it. Emerald more specifically at this point, but I'd have wanted to see the development that led to that on screen, not through a flashback anyway. But maybe you can do something like that for Vacuo. Anyway, just throwing it out there as a possibility in case it happens so I can say I called it. The next section is pretty quick, and you can probably guess them all. We're in Safe, and the first one is John. He has so much more story and development to go. He's kind of fallen off it a little bit in the last, like, volume or so, but I think the events of this volume will probably help correct that. But he's safe. Next is Yang, and if she's going through anything this volume, it'll be trust issues and falling out with those around her. I do wonder if it'll be with RWBY. On one hand, her unwavering, determined love for RWBY is one of my favourite parts of Yang's character, especially through some of the slower parts of some of the recovery volumes. But on the other hand, if they did fall out, it could really help them both get some big development and evolve the relationship of the whole team. And also it'd just be some actual interaction between the pair, which is missing lately. Also, yeah, she'll be physically fine. She's not losing any other limbs. We're not doing that whole recovery again. So, yeah, she's safe. And let's roll that in tighter with the next person. Who would have thought it's Blake? I think Blake and Yang are going to go through it this volume. It'd be easy to say that they do like a basic fallout and reunite relationship thing. A lot of people don't really like that Blake and Yang are becoming one character who really doesn't interact with anyone else casually, and I can see their point. But the pre-volume material shows them at least split up to start, which is reassuring on that front. But honestly, I think Yang and Blake are going to be heavily driven back together, be it falling out with the other half of their team and therefore finding solace with each other over their decisions, or just the tragedy of the fall is going to cement them romantically together through that tragedy. At least it's a decent catalyst to do it, you know, it's a huge event. Where this time it'll be that, you know, Blake stays after the huge tragedy and it pulls them together. That comfort that neither of them had after the fall of Beacon because of the separation. So it'll just be the inverse of that, which, you know, it works for story beats. You can see the sort of symmetry, poetry to that. So, you know, it'll be earned. Oh, and quickly, while we're touching on the subject of Blake, I want to cover the ideas people have thrown about, like, if she gets hurt, or what would happen to her. A lot of the ideas thrown around would be, like, losing an ear, and, you know, there's a lot of weight to that for her personally, because it's, you know, a sign of Fauna's heritage, and, you know, she hid them, and it's a big part of her identity, and then also it makes her, you know, not symmetrical, like the Yang thing, and also, you know, she's beauty, everyone loves her, you know, it's part of her character, and now there'd be a physical flaw to that. I can see that on, like, a writing level. When you do it on paper, it sort of looks alright, but for imagery, if you actually like chop off one of her ears like halfway up, it would look really strange in the actual like on-screen design. Maybe you could work with it to get it better, but honestly it's gonna look odd, and I think it would be really hard to get used to. More than just like the hair, it would be an odd part of her character, and I think it would make her stand out a lot. So maybe don't do that, or do something else, but you also don't want to lose a limb and go through that whole big recovery thing like Yang did, and it feels a little forced if it was a limb as well, right? Like to match Yang. So maybe just don't. Next is Weiss, and yeah, she'll be absolutely fine, but that family conflict will come into play. Her and Winter being on opposite sides will be fun and will happen. It'll be tense and it'll be, you know, par for the course in what's to come. I do wonder when things start looking like dire, as we all expect them to get. if she'll take her mother's words and actually try to get to Schnee Manor or something and try to make sure Whitley and her mother get out safely. It'd be a nice sort of humane touch, whereas Winter might sort of, remain on mission trying to defend. Just an interesting idea. Next up is Ruby, and surprise, surprise, she will be fine. Like I said earlier, she might face some fallout from her decisions, especially with her team. I hope she also has a good talk with Crow at some point, but that seems pretty likely anyway. Just for a cool idea, just on the side, I'd be down for Ruby to trigger her eyes on the whale. Not that it should outright kill it, as we saw with the Leviathan, but half petrify it so it crashes out of the sky. It'd just be a cool visual. I will say that's actually not my pitch on how to kill that whale. I have another one that will be in here later, but cool idea they could use. Oh, and while I'm here, I'll also talk about the whole eye for an eye thing. If Ruby will actually end up losing an eye, it's become a popular theory. And does it affect Silver Eyes, like only one of them, and whatever. Ruby with an eye patch is a cool sort of concept. The only thing I'd be worried about is if you want to do Blake getting hurt, and then you want to do her getting hurt. You got 3 out of your 4 characters of the main team all have just so happened to have lost one random body part / organ, and it starts to look a little comical. So if they were going to do that, don't do the Blake thing and pick and choose. But I think the eye patch would look a lot cooler than the cut ear. Anyway, not against it, we'll see if it happens. As you may have noticed, perhaps somewhat controversially, there is only one spot left on safe, and I'll give you 3 guesses, and if all of them weren't Salem, what are you doing? Because it's obviously Salem. That's kind of the point. She literally can't die. However, to immediately contradict myself, I hope she does. But, it won't stick. I really want to see her die and completely recover. I think it'd be a missed opportunity to not see massive destruction to Salem's forces, probably with the destruction of that whale Grim. It's the obvious pick here, and then possibly even a great sacrifice for someone to do this damage, only for Salem to just reform and stand back up out of the destruction. We saw it once with the Jinn thing, but really here is where we should see it again to reinforce how absolutely unstoppable she is, and whoever sacrifice it was for nothing. Now we go on to the unlikely category, and I actually wonder if people will be mad that there are some people missing from this category, which means they are elsewhere. But to start out, we have a pair. A sort of duet, if you will. It is Flint and Neon. I put them here because they're recognizable faces who they could kill off, and seeing them laying in the rubble is certainly something they could do. In fact, I think it would be a good cinematic horror of destruction moment. More powerful than seeing them act of them actually dying, especially if it was Neon's bright design laying lifeless in the smoky, broken grey ruins. But since they're crowd pleasers, it isn't necessary to convey the story, and I don't think it's a high possibility. I personally think it'd help give a little more purpose to their appearance in Volume 7, rather than it just being to pop the crowd for a brief scene. It'd make something of their presence, but I could also see them successfully helping people, etc., to get away, so death is low on the list. And next is... Jacques Schnee. I know, a lot of people want him dead, and I'm not saying I want him alive. I'm saying given who he is and the story we have, I think it's unlikely that he actually dies. Yes, he's in prison, as seen in the trailer, and he could be left there and drop out of the sky with Atlas and die, but I don't think he will. I think it's very likely he escapes, probably when Watts does, and because of who he is, weasels his way out. I'm assuming Watts just turns off the electronics and security or something, or Tyrion busts in, whatever. I don't know if they'll try a moment of redemption, like him going and trying to save his family at all, maybe. I mean, he isn't inhuman, but I don't know, I also doubt that. I also don't know if it's needed to kill him. Weiss arresting him and taking him off his pedestal is kind of a better victory as a character for her than it is him dying. Him dying actually kind of cheapens that. It's the easy win. She may really dislike him, but I don't think we need to spend time on her grappling with his death, because all the results are bad. If she moves on immediately, it wouldn't reflect that well on her, despite how much of a bad person he is. And if she didn't, we'd have to spend time going through those feelings, which no one wants to do, and spend that much time thinking about Jacques. So I think it's better he just scampers away in defeat. He's already, publicly a criminal and a bad person, and he won't be leading the company He's been disgraced and we can move on from it. And it's actually a bigger punishment if he has to live out his life in shame and eventually see all of his work taken over by the people he didn't want to take it, see them do a better job with it, and make something of themselves without him. I think that's more likely. The next entry is Willow Schnee, and I feel bad for making her even have to be next to Jacques on this list. Willow again sits in a difficult to decide on area, whereas yes, killing her would be horrific and powerful for Weiss and Winter and probably Whitley. Dealing with it could have lots of potential and lots of powerful emotions for the family. And how it happens could weigh heavily on them, like as characters. They might feel like they failed her even. But it also sits on the needlessly cruel section where a powerful death can be done elsewhere, and she's basically a purely sympathetic character. She definitely doesn't deserve it, and it moves her ahead of her husband, who at least we feel a lot less bad about something like that happening to him. Now is on to a big one that people might think is controversial. I struggled with this one. Putting her in Wasteful but Possible was pretty much a coin flip, but I ended up putting her here for like a writing reason. And that's Penny. Basically, it's too soon to do this again. Not in an I couldn't stand it kind of way, but in as soon as she appeared, people were saying, oh, so when is she gonna die again? It wouldn't carry the weight. It'd feel cheap and lazy, so I hope they don't. However, I do think there's a high probability that she gets absolutely trashed and is about to die. To be actively dying, and Pietro has to sacrifice himself to bring her back. Not a full resurrection because it's implied that took a significant amount of time, and he implied he wouldn't be able to, but perhaps he could give what's left of his life to recover her one last time. Just a bait and switch because everyone expects Penny to die again, but instead we lose someone else, and she keeps her maiden powers because she doesn't die, and we don't have to go through finding a new host. And yes, Pietro is on this list later on. It sounds a bit cold to say that she won't die because it wouldn't carry the same weight as her dying last time, but honestly, that's how it'd be. You have to remember, like, that is the reaction half people had because she's the robot. She can die again. Why don't you just bring her back again? Well, then Pietro counted that. But now, well, so she's on her last life. Well, then it's gonna mean more when she dies, right? But then she'll die again and you'll be like, they're doing this again, and it just goes in circles. Just don't. Save it for later. I know having a character that strong around can be an issue, but you can find ways around that. Alright, well, so next up is the Prince himself, Whitley. Since the interaction with Willow, redemption has sort of been speculated about for him, and, you know, I can see that arc actually being more of like an end-of-series post-story type thing they start working on for the implied future, but it may happen in the show. Whether it does or doesn't, however, he's safe for basically the same reason as his parents, in that it isn't needed. He's not nice, but he doesn't deserve to die for it, and he has the added armor of also being a kid, so killing him is just way less likely, and it robs him of that possible redemption in life, which is tragic in a mean way rather than a meaningful one. So yeah, he's gonna make it through this. Oh, and the last one in Unlikely is one that I also think might be sort of controversial, but I'm on a very different stance than other people. I really think this should be in Safe, but I put him here at the very top of Unlikely instead, but I swear he's just gonna be safe. It's Oscar. Yeah, I know Salem wants to kidnap him and kill Ozpin again so no one can stop her, but I don't think that's actually happening. The kidnapping bit might, but I don't think Oscar will die. 1, he has story to go. 2, he's pretty much a main character at this point. 3, we need him and Ozpin for things to come at the other schools. Also, he's an innocent little kid who I don't think being brutally killed on screen is something we want to see. He just got his semblance and or magic, so there's that to explore. Plus, there's figuring out Ozpin being back in his head and how that's gonna resolve. He just has too much to do to kill him now. He might go through some rough times though. You might say, well, you know, Ozpin will reincarnate again, but they're not going to do the whole story of someone else getting acclimated to that and then finding him and talking to that person and then bringing them into the team and all that growth and getting to know your staff as if Oscar didn't exist. It's just not worth going down. It's a waste of time. Oscar will live. I did have just some side thoughts about maybe how he will live or, you know, whatever. With Salem, I don't know, she should be pure evil and like grim kill kids all the time. And the fact there's plenty of kids about to die down in Mantle and Atlas and whatever else. But it'd be interesting if being face to face with a child again, like, you know, her own children, she might not sort of be able to kill him, especially with Oscar not just being Ozpin. I don't know, maybe not. The other one is also being, interestingly, if Salem has an unexpected reaction to talking with Oz again, because it's been a very, very long time, it's implied, since they had any direct conversation, and maybe it'd be some response that she wasn't expecting, that kind of thing that doesn't happen to you in the presence of that other person. Maybe that's just wishful thinking, but I thought it'd be a fun twist on how you expect things to go. But either way, yeah, Oscar's gonna live. Now, I guess a little bit of fun, we're on to the filler death section. Deaths that absolutely can happen and may happen, but they're characters we don't really care about, so they just get mentioned in here in the middle. The first two are Cobalt and Ivory. We've seen them once. They kind of go along with Neon and Flint, but they matter even less. If you want to stick them in the rubble of the dead, it doesn't really matter. Yeah, it's like the Thirsty Moms. It kind of sucks that you have the context for who they are, but you also don't actually really care that much. If Flint and Neon go down, they definitely will as well. Or they can just spill up space among the dead on the floor, implying they got separated or whatever. They also are huntsmen, so even though they are technically kids, they sort of signed up for it, or at least huntsmen in training, you know what I mean. The next one is someone that I almost forgot existed and remembered at the last minute and had to put in this script, but it's Henry Marigold, because yeah, he's here too. I think it's most likely we'll actually see this snobby brat huddled, shivering and crying while May and the Happy Huntresses are protecting him and a group of other survivors. I think he's more likely to survive than not, but again, you can throw him in the piles of dead if you want to. The last two in this category are a pair again. It's Councilman Sleet and Councilwoman Camilla. I do think it's actually quite likely we see them going down with Atlas and dying. They seem like decent people, but we kind of know them, and their positions being vacant doesn't bode well for Atlas's recovery. So seeing them go down with the ship, as it were, seems kind of fitting. And they're adults, so it's less cruel visual, even though they don't deserve it. I think it'd be more like they're stuck in a building and you see like their eyes go wide and then the city falls or whatever. We can move on quickly to the wasteful but possible category, which is where we put people that certainly could die, but doing so here feels like it would be a real waste of character. The first entry on that is Winter. Now, I admit, she's on the front lines in this fight, and there's a decent argument to be made that she might be in some serious trouble. However, there's a few things. First of all, having her opposed twice is interesting, and so are her moments in the previous volumes of fighting with her emotions. As a character, she has more to give, I think, and having her ultimately move out of a soldier's role into a leadership role in Atlas once it's rebuilt at like the end of the series type deal, there as the very end would be quite fitting. Moving into a role almost initially like Weiss wanted to make things better for the Schnee Dust Company, but instead she moves to that position in Atlas, and she takes on those ideals she talked about being a maiden, a chance to do some real good for Atlas and Remnant. Although she doesn't do it through powers, she can do it through leadership. See, I personally don't think we need to see Weiss going through losing Winter, and I think her taking an eventual position, perhaps as general or headmaster, or I guess both, by the end of RWBY as a show is a much better story. Now, giving her life for Atlas or to save Weiss, these are heroic, noble things, and she absolutely could be written to do those here. But I think that's a waste at this point. I also think it's likely that what a lot of people speculate that in this volume she will be the new default Aesop's leader as the personal right hand to Ironwood for this conflict. That makes sense, and yes, puts her in danger, but I think she will be surviving. And next up is the literal best way to add some flavor to the show, Neapolitan. She may be best girl, but she's also in danger. I put her in wasteful but possible, but honestly, there's some personal bias there. I say that because waste is kind of theoretical. Part of me really wants that Neo backstory, but part of me doesn't. It doesn't do much at this point. If we just let one thing imply to us the basics and let us fill in the rest ourselves, it might just be better. They could do a flashback on her and knock it out of the park and make it awesome. Or it could really miss and ruin her and what is one of the most favorite side characters of the show. Doing that would be unnecessary, and it would be even more of a waste in the end than not going into it. So, I don't know, I put her here. Either way, there's a chance that she tries to assassinate Cinder and pays for it, or maybe she tries to assassinate Salem because she doesn't even know the full details of that. Or she could fight Team RWBY or something. She very well could die, is my point in the end. I don't want her to, but as very much a side villain, we have to accept that she most likely will die as her ultimate fate. We don't spend enough time with her to get any real other resolution, like she finds something to live for or leaves to go to some place where she'll fit in and goes to do that and it feels resolved. She just doesn't have the screen time budget to allow for that. But also losing her means we lose one of the most expressive characters, interesting fighters, hard challenges, and fun semblances in the show, which feel like a waste to lose before we really explore what they're capable of and sort of milk them for all they're worth, honestly. But it doesn't seem like we have enough time in this volume to fill in all those things that could be. Just like ice cream, she's a treat, but that works well in small doses. But I do hope this isn't our last course. Next up and last for this category is the one people will hate is here, but it's true. It's Cinder. Now, many people hate Cinder, and she's meant to be hated, so, you know, good job, Cinder. But what I mean is some people overly, aggressively hate her to the point where she's in any danger or in any fight, people just want her to die, so she's gone. But that's a terrible idea. Cinder is the storytelling definition of a necessary evil, because if she's gone, a big centerpiece falls out of the middle of this plot, and it's one of the things that makes you care. If she's gone, then your only big villain is Salem, who is mostly background, and even after this volume where she's on the front lines, remains immortal. She's the world's villain and Oz's villain, and yes, it's the ultimate big bad, but the fact you hate Cinder so much is why she needs to stay. If she's gone, your villain side feels hollow. You aren't as invested in the others. Tyrion's a murderer with Crow rivalry, and sure, he's the next one we care about, but nowhere near the level of Cinder. Watts is out of steam and has no interaction with our main team, and Hazel is a hollow powerhouse we haven't interacted with for 2 volumes. If all you have left is Tyrion and Salem, you actually don't really care that much. You care about stopping them, sure, but it's just because the overall world is a threat, and in general it doesn't resonate. It should, but it doesn't. Yes, even with Salem killing Summer, it should be enough, but it's not. She doesn't inspire the hatred Cinder does, and you need that around. Cinder should be the last general to die before Salem, not the first. But it is possible she can die. She can die here. Also, she's one of the people we absolutely do need the backstory on, unlike the Neo situation. And it feels like it might have some ties to Alice with how she spoke to Winter, so this could be the time for it. Like I said, this is potentially the volume of flashbacks, and if that's the case, there's a good chance one of them is Cinder's, but I don't want them to do the somewhat cliche, fill in the backstory so you know them, then kill them off. She needs to stay around. She is besides Emerald and Mercury as well, but she's the longest running villain. She's the most personal villain we've had along the way, and she shouldn't go away until we absolutely can't use her anymore, which will be right at the end. You may hate her, but she should survive. Now we're through with that, we can move on to the scary ones. Let's move into Imminent Danger. Characters who very likely could die. And the first one up, I've already covered, but that's Pietro. I think it's highly likely he dies in this volume. Probably to save Penny, by handing off some more upgrades like the shield grenade Jean will get from his shop, and helping them launch the tower, his role will be done. I kept thinking at the end of Season 7, what was the point of keeping Watts alive? It's not just that it fits Ironwood's character to arrest him. You don't do something like that unless you have a use for him. What is his use in Volume 8? And I think the answer to that is Pietro, because it's a tech battle for the tower. They know about it now, so now it's launch it or sabotage it. So, if Pietro doesn't sacrifice himself restoring Penny, he may stay behind at the launch site to make sure the tower is fine before it blows up or something. After Atlas, I don't think the tech element will play as big a role, because we won't have the Atlas robots, we're probably going to a place like Vacuo, it's not as civilized and all that kind of stuff. So it won't play that big of a role. So I don't know why we'd need him, and his death can be fitting and emotional. And you can credit him with literally helping to save the world by the end of the volume with the launch of that tower. And the next one, this one's a heartbreaker. He almost goes in filler death, but we love him, and it elevates him here, and it would be a real tragedy. It's Klein. I really hope we come across him in this volume. There's no reason we shouldn't, and there's equal chance that if we do see him, it'll be amongst the dead later as well to crush us. Or, maybe we can see him escape, and that'd be some relief. It sits right on that line of cruelty where they can do it. What I was talking earlier about Weiss taking a personal loss in this, Klein could be the perfect candidate. He's older, so it's not like a kid, just reduces his chance of surviving. and rather than that wishy-washy I'm supposed to hate him feeling of someone like Jacques, or the, absolute direct loss of someone like Willow, but we don't know her that well, this one is not outside the realm of something they can absolutely do, but still have Weiss move on from, and understand how those emotions are affecting her without deep diving on the character the next volume. And the next two are very spicy, because you might have noticed some very major characters missing from this list so far, and here they are. It's Ren and Nora, and I fear for my life over this. I know, attack me if you want, if it makes you feel better. I won't actually go into a huge deep dive here. Instead, I'm actually going to recommend you check out my other video. It's literally the only other video on my channel right now, and I'll link it in the description and, whatever else. In that, I go into why I think this actually might happen and what it will cause. I will say that no, I don't think both of them will die by any means. I think one of them will. And I go into that, which one, how it could happen, why I think it somewhat needs to happen, and what will trigger it in that video. Suffice to say, I put them here for a good reason, and I think it's absolutely something that could happen to be the really big tragedy for this volume, outside of the general mass destruction of battle and some of the other more minor losses. So please go check out that video if you'd like a 20-minute plus deep dive on why this might be a thing. Anyway, moving on. The next one on this list is Maria. She's here because she has very little else to offer. She's taught her Silver Eyes lesson, and what does she have left? I saw that the writers mentioned they wanted her in more scenes in 7, but didn't find space for it, which is probably just to add some humor at this point, but that's about it. She's the default pilot, not much else. I can see her getting one last shot in against Salem's forces, maybe blow something up or take something down and give her life for it, completing what she mentioned about protecting others to the bitter end and feeling like a failure. Some personal redemption for her before she goes out. If you want to make her go Attack of the Clones Yoda flipping everywhere like crazy for one fight, okay, fine, but she should pay for it with her life. I think this could be the end of her, and I think it would be fitting to do so. So that's Maria. Next up is our first actual group entry, and it's the Happy Huntresses. They're certainly on Death Watch. We know them, their mission is noble and sympathetic, and they're on the front lines between the survivors and the coming onslaught. Their saving grace may be that the survivors are not the direct target, it's the city of Atlas and the staff that Salem wants, rather than those trying to evacuate. But there's plenty of grim around, and lots can happen over the length of this 14-episode, 2-day battle. I don't think they're totally dead, but they're not in a great position, so best of luck to them. Now, onto the next team who are in far more danger, the Aesopes. They are like the Huntresses, except they're absolutely on the military front lines for the incoming force, and are likely to be in a position to have direct confrontation with Salem and or her generals face to face. Defending the staff, standing beside Ironwood, and they have an active rivalry with Team RWBY. I don't think they'll die to Team RWBY or anything. Salem's clearly the bigger threat, but my point is their odds are stacked against them, and they're not really main characters, so they can be killed off far easier. So they'd better watch their backs, just saying. Next up is Robin. I would have put her with the Huntresses, but being as she's more of a main character, she gets her own entry here. Now, a few things. I initially put her in Rest in Peace. For real. People don't really like her character, like within the fandom. She isn't really needed. She's kind of responsible for crashing the transport and the Clover thing, etc, etc. That's not bias from me. I don't really mind either way. But on the same note, that means I'm also not really invested in her either. However, I can see there's actually most likely for Robin to be positioned as the people's champion going into that election for the underclass, because they will remain behind her, and when they attempt to rebuild the Kingdom of Atlas eventually, she'll be placed in a leadership role. She was the next option to be on the council. She probably should have been on the council. And if it falls apart, then she's a leader people can look up to. The more I thought about it, the more I think that's the route the writers are likely to take. It could work with the Winter idea too, I suppose. Winter can take the military seat and or the principal role, and Robin the leadership position as they restructure how Atlas is run. So with that possibility in mind, it brought my ideas and my expectation for her back a little bit, so she's in imminent danger. She's not Rest in Peace just yet. Still, in a lot of danger, very much could die. But the next one along is someone, well, we're getting to the real serious end of things now. It's Tyrion. his rivalry with Crow is at a point where a deadly showdown will happen, and it could happen here. The fight can be a good place as any, and if Crow comes out in a rage, actively seeking revenge, this battle could be it. There absolutely should be deaths in this volume, and the good guys should be taking heavier losses of them, but Salem has 4 generals. 3 of them are here, and we can lose one. It would be time for that bloody showdown with Crow to end once and for all. If he's gonna go, send him off right in an awesome fight, but we can lose him here. It's a good time to do so. And last in this category, gee, I wonder who else it could be. Oh look, it's Crow. Yep, I think Bird Boy is in a bad place. After the Clover incident, I thought he might just fall off the wagon and become a mess and a liability, but since we're heading into all-out war and Tyrion is hanging around, I think there's a good chance he both falls off the wagon and goes out for murder. Outside of Tyrion, or in addition to, there's also a good chance he dies protecting Ruby. I'd say and Yang, but come on, it'd be Ruby or just the team in general if so. He also should learn the news about Salem killing Summer, since there seems to be some story there. For whatever reason, the fandom has spun all the theories, but whatever way it actually goes, the conversation is something we should see before he does eventually go, whenever that may be. Again, he can travel with them and be an asset going forward. His usefulness isn't done, but it's certainly at a point we could lose him from the story. I admit, I'd like to see him and Raven or him and Ty really work some stuff out about their past, but also his death could have impacts on those characters moving forward. But overall, yeah, there's a decent chance he dies here for a big gut punch death for this volume, sort of the almost safer option of the Ren and Nora idea I talked about earlier. But now, we move on to the main event, and if you're keeping track, you can already figure out who's left. But first up, in the Rest in Peace section, is the good doctor, Arthur Watts. He's escaped judgment once, he should not do it again. Like I discussed with Pietro, the tech battle really should be ending with the launch of the tower, or failure to, but I expect it will launch. He may be a tech genius, but Atlas is his speciality and where his backstory leads. He's an irredeemable, murderous bad guy. He will not be missed, and it's satisfying to see him go to balance out the surely more horrible deaths we'll be experiencing as the good guys. Again, like with Tyrion, Salem should take some losses, and Watts is the perfect one. We don't need his skill or presence after this. You can see from the pre-volume material that the team are shooting out the cameras down in Mantle, so it's assured that he gets out. But after this, we don't need him anymore. So, if you're placing bets, put the safe money here, Dr. Watts dies in Volume 8. And now, last but not least, gee, I really wonder who it could be. I think everyone can predict this, and it absolutely should happen on like every level of storytelling. Rest in peace, James Ironwood. Yeah, it's not a shocker, it's surely the safest bet of the volume. Side with him or not, the captain really should be going down with his ship here. I believe him when he said he'd sacrifice whatever it takes. He would, and he will. I really expect him to, well, how do I put this? I guess we dip into Star Wars briefly again, and I'd say pull a Holdo maneuver. For some reason, I can really picture him going to a control ship when things are dire, radioing the team and saying what he has to say. Final orders, understanding, maybe asking for some forgiveness, whatever else, and kamikazing that ship into the whale, destroying it. You can justify him not bailing out by firing guns and maneuvering it at the incoming Grim that try to stop this attack otherwise. He arms all the explosives, he destroys the whale and himself, a ball of flames and destruction. All the robots have been previously shut down from their control ship, so it's just him. That'd be where I do the moment of Salem rising again from the ashes, a destroyed pile of goo that just reforms again, making James' sacrifice feel somewhat cold. And you can have him say that he knows it won't take her down, but it will slow her down. So James doesn't look stupid. That'd actually be my end to the volume. Even though Atlas is lost, they launch the tower. They radio ahead and tell the allies what is coming, and the team is escaping along with whoever is left, the survivors in a small fleet. Again, it somehow ends up lining up with The Last Jedi. Wasn't really intentional, but this scene can still work this way. But the small fleet of survivors are leaving Atlas and Mantle in its smoking rubble with many, many dead. A small contingent of survivors may be out on the tundra in a defendable location, perhaps with the Happy Huntresses, and they'll attempt to rebuild something once all the forces leave. Global communication is restored, and those in charge are warned. This is where I'd briefly reintroduce people like Glinda just in the call. They don't even have to say anything, just, show that she's talking to the world and the headmasters. They're fleeing to Vacuo since it's their best chance, and James gives his life to delay Salem's pursuit. But she stands right back up. She is delayed, but she will be following. The last thing we get before the credits is the small fleet flying away, Salem rising back to full health and staring them down like daggers. She'll need to regroup, but she won't be long. The people of Vacuo have been warned, but they're on the clock. And then, credits roll. And then, post-credits, we get to see some familiar faces. It's bright, it's sunny, we get our first look of Vacuo, as we see perhaps Team Sun, or Team Sun and Team Coffee, just sort of mingling around in the sun, talking, having a casual time, and they walk off screen, and in the background step 3 shapes out of the shadow. A very large hooded man, and 2 smaller ones beside him. It's Hazel, Emerald, and Mercury. They're already here. They will be waiting for them. They have plans to carry out. They will be sabotaging things. And Salem will be arriving just as quickly. Oh no, it's gonna happen again. Cut to black. And just like I think that might be the wrap-up of the volume, that's the wrap-up of my little theories and ideas about who could be dying in this volume. Why and how for some, and just generally where I think we'll be by the end of the volume. Also, I'm putting this in here. I know Jin wasn't on this list either. She can't die as far as I know. So, you know. Anyway, this was an exhausting way to do this. Like I said, I wish I'd done it a different way, where I could have made more in-depth videos about some of this. However, I wanted to get this all out before the volume starts. But, that all said, if you liked the video, there's a button for that. Same for if you didn't. If you have thoughts on any of this, you'd like to discuss them, please leave them down below, as I'd love to read them. Hit the bell and all those YouTube things. Until next time, I really hope you have a wonderful day. My name is Rigger, and I hope I did alright. Just for a cool idea, I'd be down for Roogie.